Did you know there are actually three different resume or CV formats for job applications to choose from? What's the difference and which one should you use for your job application? That's what we'll cover in this video. Hey, this is Michael with Michael's Business English. For those of you who have no idea who I am, my name is Michael Rincon. I'm a former six-figure data analyst turned ESL instructor and career coach. If you are new here on this channel, we talk about business English, communications, and career development. So if you're into that, make sure you like and subscribe, and all the links that we mentioned in this video you can find in the description below. So before I get into the different formats for your resume, I want to bring something up very quickly. Is sometimes I see people call it a resume or a CV and it's kind of confusion. So a very quick overview, it depends on the country you're from. So in the United States, in America, we typically call a resume the traditional document. And a CV in America would be something you use for the education system if you're going to get a job in a university. It's much longer. But in the UK, the CV is actually the resume. So in the UK, people call their resume a CV. That's the thing I want to point out to you. They're basically the exact same document. It just depends on where you're from and where you're applying to, what country you're applying to. So for the sake of this video, don't get too hung up on whether it should be a resume or a CV, because the data I'm going to give you here, it doesn't matter. You can apply to both a resume or a CV. It can be applied to any country, and I'm going to go into more detail about how that works in this video. All right, so the first type of resume format that you're going to see is called the chronological resume format, also known as the reverse chronological. This is the most common format. You may have seen this already, but basically this is where we list our work experience in order of the date with the most recent position at the top or the present position at the top. And we also list the accomplishments for each position we've had. If you've ever looked at a LinkedIn profile, if you're familiar with a LinkedIn account at all, that's what LinkedIn looks like. You'll see that the experience is automatically aligned from most recent present to descending order. So the most recent positions will be at the top and your first position will be at the bottom. Now, a mistake I see people make with this format is they list every single job they've had throughout their entire life. And here's something that you have to understand. Even though it's called a reverse chronological resume or CV, you don't actually have to list every single job. How you decide to list jobs is going to be up to you. It's going to depend on your situation and the jobs you're applying for, as well as how much experience you have. But as a good rule of thumb, I have two tips for you. The first one is that if you have positions that are over 10 years old, you probably don't need to put it on your resume or CV. And the second tip I suggest to you is that you probably don't need more than 7 positions on your resume or CV. Anything more than that is probably going to just be outdated or it's going to be unrelated. So if you're having trouble with this, just list only your last 5 to 7 positions and only list positions that are less than 10 years old total. Okay, so now the second resume or CV format that you may want to use is called the functional format. This is a skills-based format which focuses on achievements and accomplishments in terms of themes instead of history. So as an example, instead of saying your first position or your most recent position, your current position, you would say something like your skill. And so what I've seen, for example, is design, and then you'll put achievements and experiences with regarding your design experience. And then project management, and then you can put your experience regarding project management, and so on and so forth. Now, the functional format is not a very common style you'll see. And one of the main reasons that you would see someone go for a functional format instead of the chronological format is because there are certain things they're trying to do. There are two main reasons. The first one is that there are significant gaps in employment, which a lot of job seekers feel that they can hide that by using a functional resume. Because again, A functional resume doesn't look at your years of experience in a chronological order. It looks at your skills in general. The second reason you might want to use a functional resume or CV is when you're changing careers or industries and you have no necessarily related experience in that field. This can be very useful if you're going into a completely different industry and none of the jobs you've had in the past are necessarily related to the jobs you're applying for now. And so you might want to use that in order to focus on your skills that are transferable. Now, a word of warning about the functional resume or CV. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that in my 10 years of working since 2010, I have never used a functional format for my resume or my CV when I transitioned from being a data analyst to being an ESL teacher. And the main reason that is because it's very uncommon. Meaning that if you send out your resume, you give it to a recruiter or hiring manager, it's going to confuse most of them. In fact, I've seen on LinkedIn quite a few posts where recruiters say, please don't send us functional resumes because we're going to have to go through and find out, do you have the actual years of experience that we need for the job? Now, I think more modernized recruiters, hiring managers, employers would be okay with a functional resume or CV, but my personal opinion is that you're probably better off sticking with a reverse chronological, or even better, the one I'm about to tell you next, which is my personal favorite. There is one more point I want to make about the functional resume CV format, which is that if you're applying for jobs online, most jobs that use an applicant tracking system, they are going to ask you to enter your job history chronologically anyway. Furthermore, if they ask you to do a background check, it's probably going to, in my experience when I was doing background checks for the jobs I've applied for and they asked me to fill those out, I had to put in all the jobs in chronological order. So, or rather in reverse chronological order anyway. But the point I'm making is that a functional resume CV is interesting, it's nifty, and it has certain utility, but keep in mind that it's very limited scope. So if you are planning to use it, you might want to think about why. So now the third and final format that you can use for your resume or CV, this is my personal favorite right now. It's one of my recommend to all my students, and it's one that if I was looking for work, I'd be using this heavily. It's called the hybrid. And if you know what hybrid means, it's a combination of a reverse chronological and a functional. And this is a very powerful tool because the functional highlights your skills, but a reverse chronological shows your expertise, it shows your experience. So a hybrid lets you do both at the same time. I'm really excited about it. So what you do is that you typically start out talking about your top 6 to 12 skills at the very high level. Like under your summary, you'll say core competencies is the most common way I've seen it. And you'll pick out the skills that are most relevant to the job you're applying for. So for example, if you're trying to be a web developer, you should talk about things like HTML, maybe Ruby on Rails, whatever is required for that job. And you're only going to talk about the skills that are related to that job. That's an important distinction to remember. Make sure the skills are relevant. But right after you do the core competencies, then you talk about the jobs you've actually did your experience. You just go down the list. And it just goes back like the reverse chronological order. So you'll see in the typical combination CV, a resume, it'll show core competencies, then professional experience. Now there's one final point I should make before I move to the summary of the section of this video, is that regardless if you use a reverse chronological, functional, or a combination or hybrid type resume or CV format, the sections are still going to show up in every type of resume or CV. So for example, you should still have a professional summary or career objective if you use that. You should still have a skills section even if you use a reverse chronological resume. You should still have a certification section or education section if that's important. And you should also include things like volunteering, any other special sections you want to include if that's necessary or required for your jobs you're applying for. It's the way the presentation will look, what sections, the order of the sections will be, that really changes in the different formats. Alright, so to conclude this video, we talked about the 3 different resume CV formats that you can use, which was the chronological, the functional, and the hybrid formats. You can use any one you want. I highly recommend the hybrid. It's my personal favorite. You cannot go wrong with that. And one of the best things about that is that it'll work regardless if you're sending resumes via email or through meeting people in person, or you're even applying for jobs online through the applicant tracking system, because it's going to allow you to hit both the SEO keyword skills section of the resume as well as the reverse chronological portion of the applicant tracking system, because it's going to come directly from your resume. All right, so I have a question for you now. Now that you've gone through my video, my question for you is, which format are you going to use for your resume or CV, and why? Please let me know in the comments. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about this. If you like this video, like it, and don't forget to subscribe. And please check out some of the stuff here on my channel. So that if you have any additional questions, I might be able to help you with that. One more thing is, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have something called the Ultimate Resume CV Checklist for you to download. This goes through my step-by-step process for when I look at a resume or CV, I'm auditing someone's resume or CV, what do I look at to see how does this need to be improved upon? So if you'd like some help with that, I strongly suggest you get my checklist. The link will be in the comments below. It will be in the description. Thank you guys. Hope to see you in the next video.